Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to some of you joining us from the West Coast or elsewhere. My name is Sang Kim. I'm the Director of Public Affairs at KEI. And today we're very excited to have Dr. CedarBough Saeji to talk to us about the political mobilization and activism in K-pop community. You should have received her bio, but she is a visiting assistant professor in East Asian language and culture at the Indiana University, Bloomington. Previously, she held position at the University of British Columbia, Korea University, and Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. And she has written extensively on Korean culture, including K-pop, so she definitely is the best person to talk about on this topic. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Saeji.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, and this is a topic that we haven't covered much in our program, so I'm really excited to really talk about this because it has been trending. It's been on the headlines for a while. So I know our audience member, their wide range of knowledge and interest on K-pop and also the fandom. So I do want to get started with basic and also kind of clarifying some information. So Dr. Saeji, could you talk to us about the demographics of K-pop fans? Who are they, especially in the United States?
Well, it's funny you asked, because right now there's a worldwide BTS fan census that's going on. Some researchers who cover fandom are doing that. Of course, that only covers fans of BTS, but it will give us more definitive data. So right now, the kind of data that we have is what we can see in online K-pop spaces and what we see in offline spaces at places like concerts. And so although some artists have more male fans or more older fans, in general, American K-pop fans are fairly young, usually in their 20s. Usually female, and there are a large number of fans who are African-American, Latinx, and many identify as LGBTQ.
Right, so, and also a lot of fans that we're talking about, they're based in the United States, right? So I know has been some comments on Twitter on, it was this foreign intrusion, or was this like a propaganda? But that's definitely not the case. So I just wanted to clear that out from the beginning. As you mentioned, we'll find out more information about how many are actually in the United States. But how are the K-pop fans in the United States different than, let's say, the fans in Korea?
Well, in Korea, the fans of a new group are usually fairly young, usually about 5 years younger than the performers that are debuting, and that makes them quite young compared to American fans. So American fans are actually older than a lot of K-pop fans. However, in Korea, there are also older fans who've been following a group or an artist since their debut, even if that was 15 years ago. And that's less common with older American fans or older foreign fans, because most of them discovered K-pop relatively recently. So American fans, we can really see that they're attracted to something that's new and something that's different, a new culture, new language, new types of performance. And that tends to mean that they're fairly open-minded and cosmopolitan. However, Korean fans can be more insular in their outlook and less socially liberal than Western fans.
Right. And of course, we're talking about this, and we've been seeing a lot of this on headline because of their recent involvement with the political activism. The K-pop fans, especially the BTS and also the Blackpink fans, I believe, they have flooded, the social media with hashtags, with supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, also posting a lot of their fan videos and photos. So for people who haven't been following K-pop, this is a surprise to them. But for a lot of us who have been watching K-pop fans and how the fandoms work, it wasn't a surprise, right? So why wasn't this a surprise to you, and what are some of the characteristics that enable them to have this massive mobilization?
K-pop fans are just like you. They have multiple interests. They might like cooking or computer games in addition to K-pop. So just because one of their interests is tied to Korea doesn't mean that the rest of their interests are. So not all of the American fans are political either. But some of them, while they're spending kind of a lot of time online in this pandemic moment, they are also carrying out activism on causes they're concerned with. And that might mean hashtag activism or signing up for tickets to a rally in Tulsa. But, you know, there are also K-pop fans who are extremely concerned with other social and political issues. So when people are actually surprised that K-pop fans could also have activist causes that they feel strongly about, it actually betrays their assumption that K-pop fans are just squealing teenagers without a thought in their heads. And that's really unfair, because, you know, fandom of even just one K-pop group becomes sort of like a gateway to this deep exploration of cultural difference. And that could be really tremendously enriching and educational. And I'm not saying that there isn't some squealing too, but, you know, it's all in good fun.
Right. So we're seeing more on the political activism, but K-pop fans are known to have, like you mentioned, be more involved in social activism in other areas, right? So could you give us a little bit, some examples of the previous social activism that K-pop fans have done, not only in the United States, but also elsewhere around the world?
Well, you know, even 15, 20 years ago in Korea, we could see groups of K-pop fans coming together and donating their money to buy rice for a facility for, you know, the elderly, or a facility for, you know, some group that's disadvantaged in society, like an orphanage. And so this is something that's been happening in K-pop for a really long time. K-pop idols, you know, they will go out and participate in environmental cleanups or plant trees. They will donate when there's a natural disaster or something that really affects a lot of people. And fans have really followed that sort of giving back to society models that they see from the idols. And this has been really important in a couple of ways. It helps the idols look like they're contributing to society, because as the idol fans contribute that in the name of the idols, then older people can see, oh, look, idols are actually a force for good in society. They actually motivate young people to care about, you know, deeper issues. And also it reforms the image of fans. So it makes fans not look like they're just, you know, trivial and, you know, screaming over exposed abdomens or something like that. It makes them also look like people who are part of the communities that they come from. And so we've seen a lot of different fan activism in a lot of different places around the world, and sometimes it's very focused on local issues. One of my favorite examples from Indonesia, one of the really large BTS fan clubs there, BTS Indonesia Amino, that fan club has really worked hard on developing literacy skills for the fans, in encouraging them to read and write and express their ideas through reading and writing at an ever higher level. And so these kinds of things are going on, fostered by fandom. You can also find groups that will provide you, for example, help on preparing for your job interview. You know, so there are older fans who are out in the workplace, who may know a lot about interviewing successfully, who are helping younger fans to acquire these skills that they can need to go out into society, or help with your physics homework for that matter, you know, fans explaining to other fans. And so these things happen on small levels that impact just one person who may be in a totally different country than you. And they also happen on a large level, like the BTS affiliated One in an Army. They managed to fundraise $1 million matching donation to BTS's donation for Black Lives Matter in just 24 hours. But that same group, One in an Army, had previously motivated donations from their fans on a regular basis for so many different causes around the world, helping people in Rwanda, helping people in Yemen, helping people in whichever country or whichever community needed help.
Right. And they're really well organized, right? And even though they're very spread out, they communicate well with each other, and they're really dedicated to mobilize and do the right thing. And that really brings it to the next question. So you mentioned the BTS matching their donation to what the fans have done. But do you feel like so a lot of the activisms are started by the fans, but do you feel like that is also affecting how the artists or the groups feel about certain issues in the society?
Well, definitely the fans in foreign countries will pressure K-pop idols to care about the issues in their countries. You know, we support you, we're there for you when you need it, now we need it in our country. And we've seen this in a more and less organized way. So I can remember, it had to have been more than 10 years ago now, Block B was in Thailand and they got really criticized for not being aware of a natural disaster that had really impacted a lot of their fans. And so this sort of thing has always existed. Fans have said, we support you, we care about your issues, you need to care about our issues in our country. And so when Black Lives Matter reignited over the George Floyd murder, then a lot of fans reached out to the K-pop stars, a lot of American fans reached out and said, you need to make a statement, you need to care about what's going on. So it definitely is a two-way conversation between the fans and the idols. And it can be very difficult for the idols to figure out how to thread a very gentle and appropriate path, because there are a lot of, you know, geopolitical issues at play, and the idols aren't, you know, reporters or university professors who are constantly aware of a variety of issues. They're actually very concentrated on their career. And so it can be quite difficult for them to just step into a moment, an activist moment, and make an informed statement or contribution.
Right, I think that's a really great point. And especially with the K-pop industry getting a lot of international attention, not only the artists themselves, but the companies, they have to be aware of what's going on around the world, and also be aware of, you know, the things that they're using, or the things that they're promoting. So I think that also puts the pressure on them to really study and research, and so that, you know, there are a lot of people watching them. So I think that's a really good point. Back on the political landscape a little bit. So we talked about their activism on the political arena. And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about this too, but do you see how this could impact the upcoming presidential election in the United States? And do you potentially see any of the candidates maybe trying to utilize the K-pop fans?
Okay, well, I mean, I think it's really important for people to feel empowered and feel like they can make a difference. And so these recent activities have empowered a lot of fans. They've taught the fans that they can make a difference when they act together. And so that's great. You know, they can work to make their artists get #1 on iTunes or get requested for a radio show. And they can also, you know, succeed in these ways of trying to make change. But, you know, at the very least, this can increase voter turnout, but could it actually be used by somebody? You know, people seem to want to know how K-pop fans can be activated, you know, for the US electoral politics. But, you know, K-pop fans are like a wild card, and wild cards are unpredictable. So if anyone wants to work with K-pop fans, instead of reaching out to fans first, they should probably get to know the music and the idols, because respecting the music is really essential to avoiding the sort of astounded and somewhat patronizing coverage of K-pop that we've seen in the past 2 weeks. And so, yeah, I think anybody who wants to actually work with K-pop fans, they need to start with understanding why they love K-pop.
Right, or else it could really backfire on them, right?
For sure.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about your teaching career. I know you teach Korean culture to a lot of students, and I'm wondering if you're seeing any trends among students who are really interested in Korea. And I'm sure they have different gateway into how they got into Korea, but how got interested in Korean issues. But I was wondering if you've seen any trends recently among students.
Well, you know, my students vary greatly, but one of the things that I've noticed in the past few years is how students are changing. So here at Indiana University, and before that, when I was teaching at University of British Columbia in Canada, students are entering the classroom with much greater understanding of Korea than in the past. A lot of our students actually have fairly extensive engagement with Korea before the class. There are even students who are doing foreign exchange in high school in Korea, and students who are self-studying Korean language before entering university to such a degree that they're able to skip the first 1 or 2 years of language classes. Oh, wow. So I think I'm so lucky I get to teach on this topic where students have so much enthusiasm.
Right, and I think the Korean language is one of the very few foreign languages that people are actually studying now these days, right? When other foreign languages are going down. So I mean, I think that's really incredible. And also, language takes time and effort. And Korean is definitely not an easy language to learn, right? So I think it's really interesting to see that people who are interested in K-pop or K-drama, whatever it might be, they are really looking into studying more about Korea and the language, culture, and also the country itself. If I could plug in a little bit, so KEI does a lot of outreach program all around the United States, and we receive at least 1 or 2 applications per year that places are interested in talking about Korean culture, Korean, K-pop. So last year we went to Philly to talk to high school students about the K-pop, and also they want to learn more about Korean politics. So we gave a talk on that. And then the year before we went to New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire, to talk about K-pop. So definitely the interest is there, and then they're very spread out all across the United States. Oh, I forgot to mention. So if you have any questions for Dr. Saeji, please feel free to use the Q&A function on the Zoom. You can ask us questions, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So kind of staying on the K-pop fans being interested in Korea. So we have a group of people who are very genuinely interested in Korean culture, and their understanding of Korea it's a lot deeper than, let's say, an average American, right? So how do you think this will impact the future understanding and diplomacy between the US and Korea in the future? So a lot of them, I mean, I'm especially talking about the students who are now studying Korean studies, who will probably become the Korean scholars, they will become future diplomats, businessmen, what have you. So how do you see this translating into the future public diplomacy?
Well, I think we can't possibly underestimate the importance of this present day interest in Korea on future relations and on academic activity. Mm-hmm. You know, Korea's been this country that Americans were woefully uneducated about, despite having a very complex history shared between the two countries. And so this is sort of rapidly reversing at this point. And the next step is to have some of these highly educated experts that are now coming out put into positions where they can actually inform policies and international relations. So that, you know, in the past, we've really had this terrible statement where we have people who cannot even speak Korean making media statements about North Korea or writing books about Korean film or whatever it is. And finally, we've gotten to a point where we can have people with a deep, complex knowledge of Korea in these positions. However, that shift is still in the works, you know, so there are still some people who are regrettably given a very large platform, even though they don't understand Korea well.
Right. And also the people who are studying and looking at Korean, there are still a lot of male colleagues. So with the demographic of the K-pop fans that you mentioned earlier, being a lot of females, and I do hope to see more female scholars, female experts on Korea years down the road. So we do have a question from the audience. I think we answered the first part. So let me just read it to you. what influence, if any, do you think American K-pop fans could have on the 2020 election? And do you think K-pop has helped young people to become more engaged in American politics?
I do think that K-pop is helping some young people to realize that they actually have political power, that they actually can make some sort of contribution. And so that is tremendously important. The young people are getting empowered through this. And because K-pop is actually, K-pop fans are across these different regional barriers, across different, age, race, gender differences, because it's such a diverse group of people that get, interested in K-pop, then it actually is bringing new people into social activism, or maybe even into political activism as well. But I really do want to emphasize that I see K-pop in general as being more of social activism than political activism. Actual electoral politics is, a very new, and perhaps we won't see that repeated incident here in the United States.
Right. And another question that I have is, could you give us insight on how the K-pop industry linked to African-American culture in terms of this recent Black Matter Live movement in the United States?
Well, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but there are a huge number of fans who are African-American, and they have contributed tremendously to the international growth of K-pop. They have been some of the most important, cultural ambassadors who have introduced K-pop to new audiences. And yet they are also the same people who are able to quickly identify cultural appropriation of, African-American culture within K-pop. And so sometimes they are also critical of K-pop, or critical of something that K-pop stars have done. And so at times there has been tension in the fandom, because there are many people in the fandom who believe that being a true fan is being somebody who is never critical of the idols. And that's obviously a bit problematic. And so there has at times been some incidences of racism in the fandom. Just like there's unfortunately incidences of racism outside of the fandom. But fortunately, because of K-pop fans being interested in learning more about the world and learning more about other points of view, I have also seen K-pop as a force to help educate people, to help bring people to greater awareness and understanding of issues like systemic racism.
Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of questions. So the next one is K-pop fandom in the United States unique? So compared to other fan groups of other musical genre in other countries, do you think they're as similarly as socially active, or is this something unique to the K-pop fans?
K-pop is socially active in most of the different countries where there are a large number of K-pop fans, because that is part of the sort of cultural practices of K-pop. When there have been events in the United States, there have also been, food drives at that event. Here's a concert, but can you also bring some cans of food to donate for a local food bank? So this is part of the ethics of K-pop. And we have seen this in other countries as well. We have seen people who are producing a tremendous benefit for their local communities, originally coming together through K-pop and then figuring out how to give back, and giving back as a group of K-pop fans.
Mm-hmm. So another question that we have, and it's very timely with everything going on. So the person asked, I was wondering if you see any international fans having a positive impact on society in South Korea in terms of social activism, such as women's rights, which is an issue at the moment.
I do see international fans having a lot of opinions, but I do think that it is something for Korean fans within Korea to address Korean local political and social issues. And I do think that there's always danger across cultures in seeing things too simply, not understanding the complex history of why Korea may be the kind of society it is. And I think that there's a way for international fans to support Korean fans who spearhead various projects, whether they are, you know, social or more political within Korea. But I think that international fans should not be the drivers of that. They should be allies and supporters only.
Right. And another very interesting question. So do you think the fans see themselves as co-manager or co-agents of the groups, meaning, like, you know, trying to support or defend their groups on behalf of them against the companies? So this person gave an example. Recently, global fandom of Blackpink and GOT7 organized protests and sent screen truck to the companies demanding more attention, budget, and promotion, and so on. So do you see the impact of the fans for the artists to have better treatment and better management from the companies?
Definitely, this is one of the reasons why K-pop fans are so empowered. This is one of the reasons why K-pop fans feel like they can have a voice on other issues, is because they've practiced having a voice on issues related to their own idols, whether it's getting them another comeback or whether it's getting them a better schedule where they're not too exhausted, because we have seen overwork even causing physical injury with fans before, with idols before. And then also we see a lot of fans who take action, for example, trying to reinstate Wonho back into Monsta X. Although that didn't happen, he was able to be signed as a solo artist. That would never have happened without fan support, because the K-pop industry only saw him as a viable soloist because they saw the depth of support that he had. And so fans demonstrating that depth of support is actually the reason that that outcome came to be.
Right, and the fans are definitely playing a bigger role, I feel like, and they're evolving their involvement with how the artists, you know, not only perform, but how they are managed, right? I think we have time for one more question, and this question says, as someone who doesn't know a lot about messaging and lyrics of K-pop music, what are some of the political themes and messages in K-pop, and how are these, and if what are the issues and themes that are prevailing in K-pop?
So actually, this is a really interesting question. A lot of people criticize K-pop for not having very deep lyrics. And part of the reason that the lyrics aren't very deep is because many artists are performing lyrics written by other people. But the thing is it does not matter if the lyrics are not that deep, if the artists are going on some VLive or some Weverse or some other platform and speaking to the fans on deeper issues, speaking to the fans about body positivity and self-love and mental health and all of these different kinds of things. So you can have a song and yeah, maybe it's a sort of run-of-the-mill love song, and that's fine, because that love is something that speaks to all of us in society. We all want to have love, and okay, it's not political, but they are actually leading society when they speak directly to their fans over this various social media networks. And they're really coming out with these very positive messages that really have tremendously helped to grow the fandom because of that messaging. So that's actually what's important. It's not what's the lyrics in a song, but what are they messaging to the fans about?
Right, and also the K-pop groups that we know of, they're mostly the idol groups, right? And it doesn't cover the entire K-pop industry. So, I mean, there are a lot of groups outside of the idol groups that we know that does have a lot of political message to their lyrics. So I do recommend checking out other artists as well. And I wish we could spend more time and answer all these questions, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Obviously, we could talk for hours on this topic. and different areas. But Dr. Saeji, I would like to thank you. Thank you so much for doing this and joining us to talk about this very interesting topic. If anyone is interested in following more about Dr. Saeji's work and also she's very active on social media. Her Twitter account is KPop Professor, or KPop Prof. So you can definitely follow her on Instagram. Follow her on Twitter for all the more information. Before we officially end, I do want to share some of KEI's upcoming events. We do have a very exciting event this Thursday. This will be the part 2 of our Korean War special event series. We'll be talking about the families divided by the Korean War. And 70 years later, their families still separated from the war. So there's this Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and also next Tuesday at 2 p.m. same time, we will be having a conversation with Mr. Marcus Kalaskis, and until very recently, he was the National Intelligence Officer for North Korea. So those are some of the events coming up, and if you haven't followed us already, you can follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and also YouTube. So with that, Dr. Saeji, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.